Well, Terry, it's great to be back here on
Yes.
our podcast every couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And today, I'd like to talk about the world today, because it's kind of a really fascinating moment in our history.
Yes.
And I know everybody's still talking about the post-COVID world, and we probably should talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
And everybody's talking about artificial intelligence, and some fear it and some love it, and biotech and how that might change our whole health aspect. I want to talk, though, really today about the world and what's going on in the world, and how do individuals actually thrive in the world of change.
Right. And, there's three aspects. You mentioned the word thrive. It's one of my buzzwords because there's three aspects: survive, function, and thrive.
Yeah.
So when crisis hits, we normally go back to a survival mode. Can I eat? Can I hydrate? Can I sleep? Can I live? Where do I live? And then after a while, you end up in a function mode. Even if you're living on the street or in a shelter or in a condo high-rise, you learn to get this norm that you create. Yeah. So that's function. But then the step above that is thrive. That means I've figured out what my foundation is. I know how to survive. Got that done. I function. I know where that is. But now how do I leverage that and jump up to the highest level to say, I'm going to go and do and be where other people aren't. And I think that's what our new world is post-COVID. I'm sick of talking about COVID like you and I talk about, but it's true. We have to.
We still have to talk about it.
It's BC AD.
Yeah.
It's like the world changed, just like it did 100 years ago with other diseases or 200 years ago with war. Look, this is just history, world history. The challenge is how quickly can we navigate through that?
Yeah.
And how do we create a new norm?
Well,
Because we're not in a norm anymore. We have to create a new norm. And there was a lot of cool things that came out of COVID.
this is what I think of when I think of the world today. Because in general, human beings often struggle with change. And
Yes.
you were bringing up the basics and the functional and the thriving. It makes me think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
That's
which
correct.
many of us have seen somewhere along the line. If anything else, in a psychology class in grade school or high school, that probably motivated you to become a psychologist.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And when I look at that, and I think back for a moment to the COVID era, I don't think about COVID. I don't think about the disease and whatever. We've all dealt with that.
Right.
The shots or no shots, have COVID, never had COVID. I don't even really want to talk about that.
We survived through it.
Yeah. What I want to talk about is the fascinating advancements that were made because of it. And one or two items that really jump out at me is innovation was huge during this period of time of where we were faced with with a crisis the world, honestly, at least in the modern day, had never seen.
Right.
And I also think of what happened to some people where they pulled back.
Yes.
And so those two things, I don't know, maybe you have a couple of thoughts on
Absolutely.
on those.
I mean, did anybody invest in Zoom before COVID?
Well, somebody
anybody-
did.
well,
Somebody did.
And I didn't. I missed that one. So I wasn't as far ahead as I thought I was. But everybody was using a different platform, and it was very, not used that much,
Right. Right.
But then all of a sudden, Zoom became this platform, and then, and that's not the only one that's still out there.
Right.
But for some reason, people went like, well, I don't know. I heard you could do a Zoom. I made up a word, a Zoominar. Like I was doing seminars in my office to the world because I couldn't get there because no one would show up.
We were doing it with our friends. We called it Zoom Tales.
We had watch parties. So Zoom, as an example, Zoom was very innovative as a concept, not as a company,
right?
But as a concept, we can communicate without having to be in person because we have to isolate ourselves because of disease. Okay, I get that. But I commonly talk about insulation versus isolation. We had to isolate because of disease for a while. I think the challenge now is people still think of isolation as the survival mode, and it is. But you can never get to thrive from survive unless you learn how to function again.
Yeah.
And I think what's really interesting is a lot of the corporate world has learned how to function again. May not be going to the office 5 days a week.
Right.
It may be going once a week or 2 times a week. Another 2 or 3 days are Zoominars and, LinkedIn and doing other things to be able to, craft how you do your business without having to be face-to-face. Would I prefer face-to-face? Always. I'm old school like you are, man. I'd rather be doing this together than on Zoom or Teams. But you know what? This is what we're doing. So I think the challenge is, how do we leave what was our normal and create a new normal?
And I think there's one important piece I'd like to tie to Thrive. We're not talking about the financial bottom line necessarily.
Right.
That's important. And companies, to be able to go forward, have to have that.
Right.
We're talking about the culture thriving, right, in those companies. And when you think about that, I look at this and I look at the innovation during COVID, and one comes to mind. We have one of our spotlights, and I'm struggling to remember exactly what chapter it's in, but Jim Gans was one of our spotlights. It was one of the most innovative moments, and it certainly compelled me. And just a quick story is that I was talking to Jim, and I said, Jim, what's happening? What's happening with you and your business? Our business is just kind of stopped right now. He said, I know, it's crazy. He said, I don't know. He said, I'm going to try to figure out what to do. So I took my 17 best people and I put them in a room and I talked to them for about an hour. And I said, I don't know how you're going to do it, but you're going to figure out how to flip our business from being all, because he's got a training company, all in person to being all online. And you got 30 days to do it. When he told me this story, Terry, at the time I was still running my own company, Main Point. And we were up to that point. We were thriving. We just came off a record year in 2019. We were thriving financially, culturally, every way, and it just stopped.
Right.
I said, well, hell, if he can do it, we can do it.
Absolutely.
So I went to our team and I said, I don't know who wants. I asked for volunteers. So I didn't pick them out. I asked for volunteers. We had about 13 or 14 people volunteer to figure out how to convert our business from being completely at the client, face to face, talking with them every day, to completely online. And you know what? By the end of that 30 days, we did it, and we restarted. Every existing client restarted. Now, new clients were a lot tougher to come by at that moment.
They had to come up.
Yeah. But it was, I think of this innovation, and I look at the world today, and I start to think about all the positive things. And what I'm thinking about is, I don't want to talk about COVID. We're going to have, it's going to be there. It's not going away. It's there. I want to talk about, though, 24 is kind of a clean slate. I don't want to talk about the negative. I want to talk about the positive.
Right.
We're going into a world of artificial intelligence and biotechnology. And by the way, those two worlds, when they interlink, do some phenomenal things. I look at that and I think, how do we take that positive energy? Okay, when we're in a survival and a big change and we're forced to do it, how do we look at something like that and create that same level of excitement and innovation and that kind of step gain that we had during COVID from the challenge to what's so positive? Forget about the negatives. Focus on the positive of AI and biotechnology, just those two subjects alone. There's probably 20 others that we could pick out, but that's what goes through my mind when I think about the world today in the transition that we have to make. And I don't know that people are as well equipped for that. In fact, I almost feel like some of the tools and some of the thinking got stripped away by the COVID era rather than built upon. But yet then when I look at those isolated instances, like I just described with Jim Gans and what it taught me to go do with my own company, phenomenal.
Yeah. And I shared this story with you earlier about, IndyCar and the Penske team and what they were able to do with IndyCar itself. And they actually navigated. Well,
you better tell the rest of the people out there that same story, because it's pretty phenomenal. Because
I'm talking to Tim Sidrick, who's the president of Penske Racing. And, we're going through this and they're doing what you just challenged your people to do. The whole racing world stopped. We had a car sponsored from our companies. We couldn't even go. We went to the Indy 500 and couldn't even get in the track. We actually went to Sarah Fisher's bar and restaurant and watched the Indy 500 2 blocks away, and we had a car sponsored with James Hinchcliffe. They wouldn't let us in the track.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So it was like, wow, I don't know how I'm going to leverage that. That was like a bust. But, you're like, okay, I'm gonna go have fun at Sarah Fisher's place. But Tim Sidrick and his crew and people with Penske's leadership said, let's do something virtual. And they put a virtual race system together during COVID, where the IndyCar drivers would drive virtually on simulators, and half those drivers had never really driven that much on simulators. Yeah. So they had to ramp up pretty quickly. And then NASCAR said, well, we got to do what they do. And then sports car, and then Formula One started doing it. And before long, there was this intercollegiate alliance of different multi-discipline drivers in different series racing against each other, they're like viewership skyrocketed.
I'll bet.
But because what are you going to do?
Right.
You can't go to the track. You have to make something work. And I think one of the things with that is this, the ingenuity of saying, I'm not afraid to move towards something I don't understand. I have to try to figure out how to negotiate to get there, by willitude to get there, because it's different. And you know what? It is scary. I mean, and I think a lot of people are still resting on how do we make the best of what we have where we are versus going, what if I blew this up right now? What if I was willing to take a chance and not give everything out, but just go take 10% of what I do or 5% of what I do, and let's go try it. And that fear factor, I think, has stopped a lot of people. But I think the new world we're in now is very innovative. And I think if we can be ahead of that curve, becoming invaluable as an individual, a company, I think the sky's the limit.
Yeah. Bring that down to the individual for a moment. And I'm thinking about, I have on my desk the old question that's been around forever of, what would you do today if you knew you couldn't fail?
Yes. Love that. Yep.
And that's really what happened. When I think back to the COVID era, failure wasn't an option. Where did we hear that before, Terry? I think from 9 different people and ourselves.
People. And they don't even know each other.
Book,
they don't know each other.
Failure is not an option.
Yeah.
So if we look at the future in a positive way and we say, hey, failure is not an option. It really doesn't matter what's going to happen. We got to figure it out together and go do that. That's the energy that's got to be tapped. And the one way that I can think of tapping that is to tap into, you mentioned negotiation, the willitude of people. And this is what I think gets stripped away a little bit, is do we use the same level of will, which is the combination of will and fortitude, will and fortitude, do we have that same mental strength and that same conviction of character and alignment to go do it in a positive environment? Not just when we're facing what we think is survival. I don't know. Yes, it was survival, but it was trying to operate, right?
That's
it was
correct.
trying to operate. So let's leave that behind and use that same power of willitude to get through to the positive side of what's going on in today's world. I think everybody talks about acceleration of technology. I want to accelerate the human being.
Yes.
And I when I look back at our experience of putting this book together, one of the things that I found myself sitting back, and I have a favorite chair that I sit in. I love to take naps in, but I also do great thinking in. And I was sitting back in that chair, and I thought to myself, well, if there's one outcome of this book, is can we touch one person so much that it changes their world and they change the world?
Absolutely.
And that's what it's all about to me. And that's what we're talking about with this kind of innovative ingenuity thinking.
That's
and so to me, we got a lot of work to do as human beings to get ourselves in that place.
And I think that one of the things that's very interesting to me is staying relevant through change, because change scares a lot of people, as you and I know. I don't care if it's cultural change, business change, family change, adaptation through adolescence with kids. Change is a part of it. If you're not changing, you're dying. It's the way we're wired. It's the way we're built. But I think about this. I shared this with somebody the other day. The actual keyboard, typewriter, the keyboard itself is like 100. It's less than 190 years old. I want to say it's 188 years old.
Yeah.
I'm real close. It's still relevant today. It's on our phones.
Right.
I mean, when are we going to get rid of the keyboard? I don't know.
It's coming though.
But how did it stay relevant? Because a lot of things go to voice. Does that mean that it didn't work for almost 200 years?
Right.
Of course it worked. But it found it, whatever that is, we, it. We talked about the other podcast. How did the keyboard stay relevant for almost 200 years?
Because it kept transforming. And it
Exactly.
transformed into different
From
technologies.
a typewriter to a word processor to
today,
a
our
computer
telephone,
screen to
right?
our phones to who knows what AI will do with it.
Right. And I think one of the benefits, hopefully, of AI is it may actually finally eliminate it. It won't eliminate it completely because somebody's got to program and all that stuff. But even programming is changing. And we've been talking about it for decades already. At some point, we're not going to type things. We're just going to do voice. And we can do a lot of that today already. If you want
Like
to do
half
it by
of what we do.
you can do a lot of it by voice today. So, all this change, though, comes back to staying relevant, and it ties, in one way to a very important topic for me in the book is knowledge. And so rather than get into knowledge right at the moment, what I just want to say is, how do you stay relevant? Well, I'm going to be 64 at the end of this month, and I'll tell you what I was about to do. I wasn't able to do it this time, but I'm going to do it when they have their next session. I'm signing up for an artificial intelligence course at MIT that's 6 weeks long, and it just doesn't fit because I'm having a little bit of a minor surgery, so I was worried about that, and I can't wait. But this is the kind of ongoing learning that people have to challenge themselves to do. So what are you doing to learn about artificial intelligence and biotech and how you might use that in your life? Well, you can't sit there and just listen to the media, because they're going to tell you a bunch of things that may not be the relevant topics of how you apply it. They're just trying to sell ads.
Right.
So this is what I want to challenge people to do, is to find a way to innovate for themselves. And it goes right back to the basics. And I hope that all the people will discover more of that as they take the opportunity to read our book.
Yeah, and that's it. It's really, wrapping in that process up. It's just realizing and understanding that, change takes place whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
Or whether we're ready or not.
Yeah.
So are we ready for change? People say, yeah, I'm ready for change. Are you prepared for change? So we talk about preparation in the book on how to prepare, how to plan ahead today, tomorrow, next month, next year. And that's what we're talking about now with 24 and this whole process coming. What does the new world look like? Well, we can't just discover it. We have to discover and claim it. We have to burn the ships. You get to the place, go like, this is so good what I just discovered. I'm not going back to wherever I sailed from. I'm going to burn the ship in the harbor. I'm staking in the ground, and I'm staying here. And that's the new recovery.
I think of crazy things like, hey, the consulting business could change radically. It'll no longer be any people on site with clients. It'll be a holograph of us.
Correct.
Through an artificial intelligence capability.
Correct. Yep.
That it's like we're there in person.
Yes.
We're talking to them. They can see us. We're moving our body. All of that is the same, but we're not actually physically there. I think it's possible. Well, imagine how that could change businesses. I mean,
and
I don't know.
and none of us do. But you either lean in toward it or you walk away from it. And It's the fear factor of, we're all afraid of the unknown. But if you're not willing to lean into it, failing forward, we talk about in the book, how do you, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to drop the ball, but give me the ball again. Give me the ball again, because I'm going to learn from those mistakes. As I tell my son who plays tennis, there are no losses. There's learning.
Right.
You lost, but I'm not after the loss. What did you learn?
Right. And I think, so if I could compel our listeners today, I would compel them to think about maybe a few things walking away from this, think about, how are you going to innovate? In order to innovate, how are you going to keep yourself relevant and educate yourself and improve your knowledge? And then lastly, what I would say is, how are you going to face this, not only as an individual, but in a team? Because no matter what we say, and Hirschberg said it himself from work he did off of Maslow, 70% of the people move away from things, and 30% of the people move towards things. This is a move towards. Yes. That's what we're talking about. In COVID, we were moving away.
Right.
And so, lots of people jumped on board to move away. We've got to motivate not just the 30%, but the other 70% to move forward into this new world. And I hope you'll enjoy the new world today, and we'll see you soon.